I love Louisa May Alcott. She is fascinating.
So that's interesting. I didn't know that they were originally published separately.
This is a character-based book with a bit of social commentary.
You could just see your passion radiating through the screen right now.
Welcome to the Besties in the Books podcast, guys. I'm Liz.
And I'm Ashley. And this is Nicole. Ooh. We are here today for our third and final for this series, covering some literary classics. This is an actual mini episode. I still put in air quotes because you guys know we like to talk over here. So we are going to be doing a reading guide today.
Yes.
Ooh, we're so excited. For Little Women, you guys have been around and you know that we've been covering Wuthering Heights, we've been covering Pride and Prejudice, and now we're going to be doing Little Women. So today we have Nicole over at Neurotically Bookish over on Instagram. She's going to share her tips and tricks and a quick little reading guide for Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is a spoiler-free episode meant to help you guys out, especially for first-time readers of this beloved classic.
Yes, we heard you. We know that you appreciated the Wuthering Heights reading guide and then the Pride and Prejudice reading guides. We appreciated them also as first-time readers for sure. Little Women is actually a reread for me, but it is a first-time read for Ashley, so we'll be going into it. I haven't read it in a really long time, so I'm really interested to hear Nicole's takes on everything that she has to share with us. Just a greater understanding of context, societal issues, the author behind the story, and many of us don't know what to expect going into these classics, but don't want to fully spoil them for ourselves before we get into it. So, this guide will definitely be for you guys who want to know a little bit more, but maybe not everything before going into it. So we're going to go over themes, and I think in these older novels too, talking about all the characters and points of view is also important. So we'll get into the characters. But before we get into all that and start talking with Nicole, we just want to say thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and your book to come and hang out with us and hear what we all have to say about this wonderful classic. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe everywhere you like to listen to favorite podcasts, including YouTube. We are Besties in the Books podcast everywhere, Instagram and TikTok. And like I said, while you're at Instagram, go and check out Nicole's page at Neurotically Bookish and give her a follow there.
Yes, so first and foremost, let's welcome our special guest on who's here to help us understand Little Women a little bit better. So welcome, Nicole at Neurotically Bookish. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you became interested in classic literature, maybe specifically a little bit about Little Women, and tell us about your Bookstagram account. And I know you have a Patreon also that you've been doing some exciting things on. So why don't you tell us about that?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. First of all, apologies if my voice is all cracky because I lost it 2.5 weeks ago and I thought, I'd have it back. But anyway, hi, I'm so excited to be here. And I'm a wife, I'm a mom, but most importantly for today, I am a former high school English teacher. I taught a couple different grades, but most of the time I was teaching 10th grade English. So that's my background. And I got my degree in English education. So I was able to be introduced to all different types of literature because of, the degree program. But it was actually really fun. What made me change my major to teaching English was my American Lit to 1865 course that I took, which is just so fitting because that's exactly the time period of Louisa May Alcott. So I just kind of fell in love with American literature in general because I think it's fascinating how it mirrors so much of our history and it's such a diverse group. I mean, put your finger on a map and there's a really unique set of texts that you can learn from and study and enjoy. So it's just really exciting. So that's kind of why I kind of fell in love with Little Women, but specifics to the book we'll get into in a little bit. I have had a Bookstagram for just about 3 years now, and it's been really fun to just connect with other people. over books. I was having a really hard time, and I know a lot of people kind of go through this. You know, you find yourself in books and then you want to talk about those books with people, and I was like, I am dying. I need to talk about this stuff that's making such an impact on me. And so I started my Bookstagram and have had such an amazing time. And during that, last spring, I saw a lot of people were wanting to read Animal Farm,
Me.
which is, it's a classic, right? It's
Yeah.
a classic, but it's like, it's a weird book. It's a weird book. And so there were a lot of people who were like, I really want to read this book, but I'm kind of confused and I just don't really know where to start. And I was like, well, I used to teach that book. Would you guys be interested in me leading a read along? And tons of people joined and it was really fun. And that's kind of what led me to starting my Patreon, because I couldn't really do everything that I wanted to do on Instagram and Instagram stories. So I hopped on over to Patreon what was it, January. And we started with The Count of Monte Cristo.
Ooh.
We jumped into Outlander. I'm kind of known for my love of Outlander. So we've done those. And funny enough, we're actually going to be doing Pride and Prejudice soon. And I've also started a guided independent study, which is, this is a little community of readers who want to continue their lifelong learning. And so this is an opportunity to kind of get an introductory text and then do a little bit more reading on your own. And so I started this guided independent study with Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail as the primary text. And the whole focus is segregation in America. So lots and lots of things going on all the time over there, but it's been really fun, really exciting. So I'm super glad to be here and talking about Little Women with you today.
We are so excited to have you. Oh my gosh. You could just see your passion radiating through the screen right now. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's like, Nicole and I met probably about 3 years ago on Bookstagram, like one of my first Bookstagram friends. It's so exciting to finally be talking to you like this. It's so cool. And I did the read along of Animal Farm and really appreciated how in depth your teaching and guide was. So yeah, definitely check that out if you guys are interested in, reading with a group of people who are also really interested in whatever you're reading, but then also breaking it down and learning the whole time. I really appreciated that because sometimes it can be hard to do as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's overwhelming. And especially I'm not an expert in Little Women. I'm not an expert in Little Women, but I love learning. I love gathering those resources and then being able to give those resources to people, which you don't have the time to do. I mean, we're busy adults. There's a lot going on. So thank you so much, Liz. I'm going to be riding that high for a week.
Love it.
It's so funny. All of our amazing guests who have been helping us with reading guides are like, we're no experts here. So humble. But I'm like, okay, but y'all have read these books a million times and you can go in with an analytical comb and you have the education for these things. So expert in our books, 100%. In our books for these books, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're so excited.
You're so sweet.
All right. So are we ready to get into the Little Women novel?
Let's do it.
Let's go. So first and foremost, what genre is this book considered to be in?
Okay, so I put it in 3 different categories. I put it in coming of age, children's literature, and family life, domestic life, domestic fiction. Some people like to put it in the romance category, and I do not agree. And I also think that Louisa May Alcott would not agree. I think she would absolutely resist that. So coming of age, children's literature, and family domestic life. So Alcott's publisher actually wanted her to write a novel about girls, for girls, that would have a widespread appeal. And fun fact, it was actually written in 2 parts. There's the first volume and the second volume, part 1, part 2, volume 1, volume 2, whatever. They were published separately. And so it's important to know because, first of all, the first half is very much coming of age for the younger audience. And then the second one is called Good Wives. and that gives you the idea that it is, going to be later on in the series. So we can talk about that more later, but I just wanted people to know and be aware going into it that there might be like, wait, what's happening? Like, there's this time jump. So anyway.
Yeah, there's a significant shift between part 1 and part 2. So that's interesting. I didn't know that they were originally published separately.
Yes, yeah, he actually just published the first part, her publisher, and everyone came back and was like, well, who do these girls end up with? What's going on there? And so she was encouraged to write, a follow-up essentially.
Oh, I love that. I'm wearing my Anna Green Gables shirt today because it just felt fitting of like a fun coming of age, story. So it's almost like merging some of the Anna Green Gables books together.
I've actually never read or watched Anna Green Gables.
I mean, I didn't until this last fall. Yeah, we are
it's on my list.
Liz has always been obsessed. She's been telling me to read it. Now I'm obsessed. Like, yeah, you're gonna have to read it now.
I know I'll love it. Yeah. I know I'll love it. Yes,
I ate it up.
You'll fall.
And that was the first time
down
reading
the
the whole
hole.
series. Yeah, rabbit hole for sure. My younger girls love it now. It's amazing. So good.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so back to Little Women. Let's just start. And like I said during this intro, it's like, I feel like one thing I've noticed about reading these classics is there's so many characters in a lot of them. And sometimes it can be hard to keep them straight. And lots of times too, it's like they'll have their full name and then they'll have their shortened version of the name, which is somehow different enough to where it's like you don't realize it's the same person at first. So why don't you break down the narrators, the characters, if there's any of that you find, useful or relevant going into it to make it a little bit easier?
That is so valid. It can be really, really hard, especially with like the books that you guys have already talked about. I feel like those are two of the most difficult. Thankfully, I think Little Women is a bit easier when it comes to that. It sounds more complicated than it is. So remembering that it is like children's literature, it has to be approachable for a lot of audiences, right? And so while there are a ton of characters, I kind of break them into 3 different categories. The March family. So we have Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. They have longer names, Margaret, Josephine, Elizabeth, and Amy. But they're the 4 sisters who are, just forces of nature. And it's a story that's following the 4 of them through their coming of age, essentially, but just kind of navigating life and figuring out who they are as little women. So we have the 4 of them. Jo is the primary character, the main character, if you will, but it is also kind of told from her point of view. Like she's the focus, but it is written in 3rd person. So that sounds kind of confusing. It's mostly about Jo and her relationships and things like that, but all 4 of these sisters are extremely important and you get to know them really well. So we have the March family, the 4 sisters and their parents, a couple of aunts. And then you have these other 2 categories. You have the neighbors and then you have society. So kind of, this tertiary lineup, if you will. So the neighbors are important because they make up their community. We have the Hummels, which is an immigrant family that is nearby and they're in, pretty deep poverty. And so they make a really big impact on the girls. You also have the Lawrences. So you have Mr. Lawrence and his grandson, who is Theodore or Laurie or Teddy. There are a lot of nicknames in this book. So he's all the same person. And he basically becomes, part of the March family. And it's a really beautiful thing to see. We've got almost some found family in this book as well. And you've got John Brooke, who's his tutor, and you have a couple of other people, but the rest of everybody else kind of just falls into the society category, and you don't really need to pay a whole lot of attention. There are these different family names like the Moffats, the Gardners, the Kings, and they'll tell you who they are. So don't get too worked up or anxious about all of the different characters. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty basic.
I feel like that's good advice because I feel like lots of times, especially if we're coming from primarily, like, let's say a fantasy background of reading, we have a tendency to like hyper fixate, I think a lot of us do, on all of those characters because we're like, when are they going to come up again? Are they going to be important? Am I going to miss something? And so it's nice that you broke it down that way and we can kind of clump a lot of those characters into the society part because then it's like it takes a little bit of that weight off where you're like, oh, I don't need to memorize every single individual person.
Right, absolutely. That's such a good point.
Definitely helps.
Yeah, I feel like that breaks it down really well. I also like that all four of the sisters have such like strong personalities that it does make them really easy to differentiate between.
Yes, absolutely. Which is really interesting because it, mirrors her real life, which we'll talk a little bit more in a little bit about that. But they are, you feel like, oh, four sisters, how am I going to get to know all of them? But they're absolutely distinct personalities. And I just love them so much. I'm getting emotional just thinking about them.
So cute. I love that. What are some of the essential themes that we should be looking out for when reading this, and why are they important?
Once again, I've broken it down into 3 different categories. So I think some of the themes are focused around family, individuality, and personal growth, which kind of sounds redundant, but it's not. So family, we've got the bonds of sisterhood. We have this idea of, family relationships can be really complicated, right? And so what does it mean to like love your family and be able to forgive your family and be united with your family? Especially back then, your family unit was how you survived. And so there's so much there, it's really complicated, right? And how do we show our love for our siblings or our parents when we are also in conflict with them? And then, like I said, there's a bit of that found family as well with the Lawrences and the Marches. They kind of fill in the gaps for each other, which is a really beautiful thing. Individuality, there is this focus on the journey of self-discovery, not only during childhood, but also during adolescence and adulthood. And I think that's something that pretty much everybody can relate to, right? But also individuality with gender roles and societal expectations, because, especially Jo, but all of our sisters experience this conflict of I want to be myself and have my own goals and desires, but there's all of these expectations that are placed upon me by society, by my family, etc. So how am I going to be an individual in those spheres? And then personal growth. So this is a really, really, really big one, especially for Jo, but for all of the sisters. What does it mean to have this like attitude of personal sacrifice? How do we love others through our sacrifice? How do we improve our own moral character? That's a really, really big one. And that stems from her own life and her parents and how they raised the girls. And then that also leads me into this really important text called The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And if you're unaware, it's a Christian allegory from puritanical times. And so that text was actually a guiding force for Louisa May Alcott's parents in how they wanted to shape their daughter's characters. And so that text shows up a lot in Little Women, and they play Pilgrim's Progress, but they also talk about these specific instances in that text where they are trying to perfect their moral character and like what would they do in Pilgrim's Progress. And if you're not familiar with Pilgrim's Progress and you're just jumping into it from a 21st century view, it can kind of feel a little bit like out of touch and overbearing, but knowing that it was a huge part of Louisa May Alcott's upbringing, I think kind of helps soften that discomfort, if you will. So overall, we've got family, individuality, personal growth. Our story starts out, with some levity. They're fun and young, but it becomes heavier and the themes become heavier as more important topics arise and as time passes and then they get older. So it's a really great picture of how you are exposed to more hardships as you get older and how you move through that. So the question is, how do we move through those heavier moments in life, both as individuals and together as, family and friends?
I love that. And I love that you brought up Pilgrim's Promise as well, because I have read this book several times now. And quite honestly, I was like, I don't really know exactly what they're talking about this whole time. So I just kind of like accepted it and moved on. But now that you've actually like explained it, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, great. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting because personal faith is it's a really personal thing, right? And so Louisa May Alcott's upbringing, again, we'll talk about this more in a second, but she has a really interesting approach to all of that. But it really boils down to, perfecting one's moral character and being the best version of yourself that you can be. And I think we can all relate to that a little bit, with or without, religious faith.
Agreed. So building off that then, why don't we just get into it? Who was Louisa May Alcott? What was going on socially and politically during the time period she wrote Little Women? And is this relevant?
Okay, so I love Louisa May Alcott. She is fascinating. She is a bit of a Cinderella story, which we tend to romanticize these authors and their lives, but she had a really hard life. She was born in November 1832, not 1932, November of 1832, and she died in March of 1888 at 55 years old. So she grew up in the Northeast. She was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She died in Boston. Most of her life that we know a lot about is in Concord, Massachusetts, and in Boston. So what a fascinating time to be living and writing in, the Northeast of America. We've got the Civil War going on. But before that, her parents are fascinating. Let me get my nerd glasses. So her parents were transcendentalists. And so this idea, this philosophy, that again focuses on spiritual and moral improvement and how you can be less corrupt and blah blah blah. But her dad was this great philosopher, and he was besties with Ralph Waldo Emerson, with Henry David Thoreau, with Nathaniel Hawthorne. And so she grew up in Concord knowing these people and idolizing these people. And I'm getting all worked up because it's fascinating to my English nerd self, right? These are huge names. These are huge names in literature, and her dad's just hanging out with them. They were so close to them that they were literally neighbors. They were living in, the Hawthornes bought one of these houses from the Alcotts. Emerson actually bailed Bronson Alcott out a lot financially. They were extremely poor. So Louisa and her sisters, they moved around a lot when she was young. By the time she was in her mid-20s, she had moved about 30 times. They were always in debt, always running away from creditors and things like that, because her dad was such a great thinker that he couldn't lower himself to get a normal job and support his family. And so that was put on the back of her mother, Abigail, and she did a lot of work. She was fascinating. She was one of the first social workers in Boston, first social workers ever. And so they have this really kind of rough and tumble period of growing up in the Northeast. And then we have the Civil War that, it just arrives on their doorstep. her parents were incredibly modern in a lot of ways. I know I'm like circling around. So
oh no, I feel like
apologies.
I'm learning so much.
But
I'm like, ooh, okay.
well, it's all connected too, which is like really fun, really fascinating. But her parents were really, really modern. So they were abolitionists. Her dad was an educator. So he was this great philosopher. The only thing that he really wanted to do was talk and teach. And he was so progressive that he actually had his school shut down because he enrolled a Black student. And so, like, you know, people say, oh, they were abolitionists, or no, these people were truly giving things up in their own lives because of their moral compass, right? So Louisa May Alcott was raised up to believe in these higher moral ideals, right? And she was also raised up in this extreme poverty of, well, crap, we don't have any food. We're moving all the time. And I need to help my family out. And so she started writing when she was really young. She's an incredibly prolific writer. She has over 200 published works, which I didn't know. But she was always writing these short stories and trying to get them published to get as much money as she could. And you see that a bit in Little Women, right, through Jo. So anyway, we have the Civil War. We have the abolitionist movement. They were also feminists, like absolutely feminists, but it's really hard to be a feminist in this really oppressive time period for women, right? And so these themes show up in the book, but it doesn't look like a 21st century feminist would, right? Just having your own ideas about what you want to do and spend your time and who you want to be friends with, and all of those ways are ways of pushing back against the societal norms of the time. One of them being, who are you going to get married to? So that shows up a lot in the book, and that's kind of Louisa's way of pushing back as well.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I noticed it even just in the way that a lot of the sisters respond to certain situations in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to. And I feel like that right there, like those are those moments of like resistance that you could see coming through the text when, you know, you have certain characters talking to, you know, let's say their love interest or their husband or their fiance in a way that might be very unusual back then. You know what I mean? Or like, wow, I can't believe that she talked to her husband like that. But for us, reading it, I was like, wow, that was probably really prolific to be able to do that then, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And the whole idea of the first book ending and people not knowing who these girls ended up with, like that was definitely a way of her pushing back as well. Because she's like, well, it's not just who you end up with. It's
a bunch of stuff.
Anyway.
A bunch of things matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Another reason why we love doing these reading guides, because it's a good reminder before jumping fully into these texts to view it from the lens of the time of which they're written, the lens of the author who wrote them, because it can really open up your world. If you just randomly pick this up off the shelf and you don't realize how these little small acts of resistance, as you say, were so profound then you wouldn't know. So thank you for bringing that to attention, because it's very important.
Absolutely.
That was all so awesome to learn about. So do you have one piece of advice, or maybe a few, whatever, for someone thinking about reading this book that you would want to let them know?
If I had one piece of advice, it would be don't overthink it. It's not meant to be complicated. Yes, it's a classic, but like we talked about, it was originally marketed for children as children's literature. So it's very approachable. The vocabulary and whatnot, if you don't know a certain word, you're going to get the context. There's a sense of ease and familiarity to the text overall. So there's a lot of conversation. It's all very commonplace. I feel very differently about the dialogue in some other classics, like what did they just say? But that's not how it is in Little Women, at least for me. So just don't overthink it.
Yeah.
I feel like that's good advice. And like, when I was rereading this, I was like, this is a lot more like if you guys have read Anne of Green Gables, it's a lot more like that kind of style and vibe. And I think that has to do too with the fact that we're not dealing with necessarily a lot of like high society like we were in like Pride and Prejudice, for instance. So yeah, it comes off a lot more casually, and it's a lot easier to understand. I think I would agree. Okay, all right, the movie adaptation. So we need to talk about these two. So obviously we know about the 1994 version. I grew up on that. It was one of my favorite movies. I've seen it 10 billion times. The 2019 version was also, in my opinion, really good. I didn't realize that there was a TV show, but apparently there was also I don't know if a miniseries or a TV show or something like that. So why don't you, in your opinion, tell us what you think would be a good adaptation to watch, which was the best, which you would recommend?
Okay, so I did my homework. I have watched 5 versions of Little Women in the last 2 weeks. But the thing is that's the tip of the iceberg, okay? There are so many adaptations of this book. There are far more than I realized. There are silent films, there are feature films, there's Broadway, ballet, just regular old stage productions, there's opera, TV miniseries, there's even an animated series, like an anime.
Aww.
Like Japanese
That's cool.
anime. I know. And so
Something
there are
for
so
everybody.
many. There's an adaptation for everyone. I know. And there's also this quote that I found in this magazine article. They said, Little Women is like the literary version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that it's an excuse for the biggest Hollywood talent to assemble for one project. And I was like, that's so accurate.
Yeah.
So there are really old versions, and then there are much more contemporary versions. The oldest versions that I watched the 1933 version with Katharine Hepburn, and I watched the 1949 version with Elizabeth Taylor. She plays Amy. Katharine Hepburn plays Jo, and Elizabeth Taylor plays Amy. I anticipated that I would love the Katharine Hepburn version because I love her. I do not recommend this. It was cringy. It was kind of weird. Everybody was way too old. There was a character that kept referring to Jo as my little friend, over and over. And I was like, this is so weird. But some people really, really love it. If you want an older version, I would recommend the 1949 with Elizabeth Taylor. I actually really enjoyed it. It's very, classic MGM kind of stage setup, so it feels it's very comforting. I enjoyed it a lot. And it's a literal remake of the 1933 version. It's almost copy and paste, so it's just way less cringy. There are a ton of versions somewhere in the middle. People were talking to me about versions from 1970s, and I was like, I didn't venture into the 70s. It was kind of a weird time. William Shatner, I guess, appears in one of them as well. As someone, I don't even know. I would recommend, if you want a newer adaptation, obviously we've got the 1994. That was my first journey into Little Women, and it honestly holds up really well as an adaptation. It doesn't fit every single vignette from the books, but it really holds true to the most important vignettes, and it stays true to the spirit and the tone of the book. So that's my personal recommendation. There was a 2017 PBS miniseries. I didn't love it. Some people really love it. I didn't personally love it. It's not super accurate, but they also had time to include some of the lesser known little stories from the book, which was kind of fun. If you're wanting one from the last 2 decades, I would definitely recommend the 2019 version. It's beautifully done. However, for me, I hadn't seen it. And I started it and I was like, wait a minute, why are we starting this movie 3/4 of the way into the book? And it flip-flops back and forth with the timeline. So if you're not prepared for that element, then it can be a little bit jarring, but it is a beautifully done adaptation. The acting is very good. Cinematography is gorgeous, and I think it still holds true to, the tone of the book, and the heart of the book, but it also feels much more modern. And I think that was part of the goal, was to modernize it a little bit. So that's a lot, I know, but there are some really good adaptations available if you're interested in that.
That's
That was the
awesome.
2019, the recent version. Yeah. So would you say then for that one, it would much more benefit the viewer to read Little Women before watching that one? The most.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, read it before you watch it, because I actually posted about it on Threads, and it kind of went a little bit viral for me. Like, so many people were commenting. I was like, whoa. But what a lot of people were saying was they loved that movie, or they hated it because of the way the timeline went back and forth. And they were thinking, it's a really good thing that I know this story so well, because otherwise I'd be really confused as to what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
So yes, absolutely read it before you watch it.
So that's good to know. So if you have already read the text, that one might be a good extension of the book, whereas maybe the 1994 one might be good if you're looking to watch the movie before reading the book, to give you more context and visualizations to the characters and stuff. Because we definitely noticed that with the other classics that we've been watching, that it's kind of nice to see it at least halfway through the book, just to like paint a better picture of what's happening. Pride and Prejudice, that really helped us to watch some of the movie first.
For sure.
Yes, absolutely. And for me personally, it's really nice to have a picture of these characters in my mind. So I would totally agree with that.
Well, and we're lucky too. It's like I was looking them up to rewatch them for our deep dive episode we're doing later. And like I said, I've seen the 1994 a bunch of times, but it's been a while. But I only watched the new one, I think maybe twice. And it's been a while since I've seen that one too. I say new, but the 2019 version.
Listen, the world stopped in 2020.
It's new. But I'm excited to rewatch them, and I was looking, I was like, wow, there's so many like Oscar winners in both of these movies. Like, they're critically acclaimed. I'm like, so either way, I feel like people will really probably appreciate them and enjoy them. But yeah, that's really good info. Like, one to watch before you read the book, one after.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah. Sounds like one of those books that really sinks its teeth in you in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, then you want to consume all of the stuff. So I love that.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Well, while we're on the subject of tips and tricks, does anybody else have any other tips and tricks when reading this book other than, listening to this reading guide?
I have one.
Okay.
I think it's really important that you do not go into this book for the plot. Do not go in for the plot. It is not a plot-driven book, and don't go in expecting some grand romance. This is a character-based book with a bit of social commentary, so just don't take it too seriously. Have some fun with it. Take it as slow or fast as you want to, because you're not like, oh, I need to know what happens. So just, sit back and enjoy it. Just let yourself be absorbed into the March family.
Yeah, it's like a cozy and comforting time. It's just, It reminds me so, and I was actually like joking with Ashley about it, because we do immersive reading for a lot of these, where they'll bounce back and forth between the audio and, the book or the Kindle version, or we'll do both at the same time. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's necessary for this one as much. However, I did love that the narrator who narrated Anne of Green Gables also does Little Women. So now it's like this cozy, like nostalgic, fun, like lady to listen to. And I'm just like, ooh, this is such a nice, it puts me at ease, makes me feel relaxed, and like takes me back to like simpler times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to need to get that narrator from you, because I did not like the one that I listened to. So
I think this also might be just because now I associate her with Little Women, because when we first started listening to her on Little Women, or Anne of Green Gables, I was like, I don't know that I really love her, but then she grew on me after 8 books or whatever. Yeah. And now when I like started listening, I was like, oh my gosh, she's great. I'm pretty sure her name is Barbara Caruso. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah, Liz literally told me last week, she's like, I Pavlov's dogged this narrator because of Anna Green Gables. So who used to like drive us nuts when we were going through that series now has become a comfort. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt, go in with open ears and
open ears, open
she'll grow
mind.
on you.
Well, because she's narrating Anna Green Gables, right? But she has like a comforting grandma voice.
Yeah.
But now it's like a comforting grandma voice.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
And it's weird because we, as audiobook readers, usually the modern audiobooks very much fit like the age that the character is, and this is more of an old school book on tape kind of narration where it's just like the well-seasoned voices of the space reading off the books and adding some flair and stuff and doing different character voices. But it's, we're at first in Little Women, these girls are younger, so it's a little jarring to hear grandma read it. But if you want, that comfort, then think of it that way.
It grew on me. She grew on me. That's all I'm saying.
That's cute. My last tip would be, if you can, I have a 10-year-old who is reading it with me. So we're really enjoying that. So that's really fun. So if there's any, children in your life that enjoy reading and want to read along with you, include them because it's so fun. And with that said, a buddy in general of all ages, because I'm enjoying it. She's enjoying it. We're all enjoying it. Everybody's having a good time. And it doesn't feel like this is like the perfect read, I think, to buddy read with a younger child because it is both, like you said, it's simple, but then there's deeper things within the text and there's comfort. And it's, of all three of the literary books that we've read, this is the only one that I would say of this series that we're doing, Little Women is the perfect one to buddy read. Mm-hmm.
I love that. And I agree. And I also think that the way that it's written, because it's these like little snapshots of life, it's a perfect read for, like, let's read 1 or 2 chapters and then we'll put it down and then we'll come back. And yeah, I love that. That's such a great tip.
Yeah. It's a good, good view and a good lens into that time and what everybody was dealing with in the 1800s and where we've come.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, before we forget to mention it too, as we did with Wuthering Heights and Pride and Prejudice, we do have a book club up on Fable for Little Women as well. So if you guys want some people to chat with about it, that's spoiler free, you could feel free to pop on there at Besties in the Book Club as well.
I think that was such an excellent reading guide and a great start. Thank you so much, Nicole, for shedding some light into some of the behind the scenes. I learned so much. I'm sure you guys did too. This was awesome.
Yeah.
We hope that you guys enjoyed this a little reading guide and it was helpful. Little reading guide, Little Women. Before cracking open this classic novel, watching the movie adaptations, and listening to our future deep dive. So in the next couple weeks, we're going to be reading this entire text. And like Liz said, we'll be on Fable, making notes chapter by chapter in a spoiler-free way. And then all the spoilers will be coming in that deep dive episode. So make sure you are subscribed and your bell notification is turned on. That way you get notified when that episode goes out. And follow Nicole over at Neurotically Bookish on Instagram and check out her Patreon too, Neurotically Bookish Reading Club. So cool. What a fun way to really like engage in the text. I love that you have that as an option for people.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun for me.
Yeah,
good.
So cool. And I'm sure it's so helpful. Like you said, with Animal Farm, like everything, all those things are so helpful when breaking down these texts that aren't as, modern as some of the stuff that we're reading right now.
Absolutely. We all need a little bit of help every once in a while. So
yeah, for sure. Well, you guys, thank you again so much for joining us today and taking time out of your day and your book to hang out. Subscribe everywhere you like to listen to your favorite podcasts, including YouTube. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, Besties in the Books podcast everywhere. Fable over at Besties in the Book Club. And thank you again, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you, Nicole.
thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. And you guys, we will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.